it should be no big deal. Like
Mhm.
if tomorrow, knock on wood, on all every wood service that I have here, like 2XU like collapses, it's still
Mhm.
gonna be no big deal because then I have learned so many skills from running this business that I can just jumpstart and start the next one after that. And I already have like plans of what that next one is.
Warning: Damian Andrews' growing revenue and profit, if implemented, will put more money in your pocket. Please use with caution.
Welcome to Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit with international speaker and revenue and growth specialist, Damian Andrews. This is your source for practical, usable, and simple action steps that you can do every day to put more money in your pocket. And now, the host of Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, Damian Andrews.
And the crowd cheers widely to the trumpeting blast of elephants sliding through eyes of needles. This is Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, the program that deals with all things that put more cash in your pocket. This is the show that handles your revenue riddles, profit puzzles, operational oddities, and culture conundrums. I am the one, the only Damian Andrews, and on today's show is the amazing and wonderful Lai Lacaba. Leanne is the CEO and co-founder of 2XU. She's an international speaker and an author. Now, she became a CEO at 20 and co-founded 2XU Executive Services at 23. Leanne is a driven powerhouse of energy and excitement. Leanne, pleasure to have you on the show.
Very, very happy to be here, Damon. Thank you for that.
No, it's my pleasure. Yeah, you've done amazing work, and we've spoken before. So let's delve straight in. Starting a business, hard or easy?
Um, it's easy when you like what you're doing. It's hard when you have to figure it out. That's kind of a good distinction for me because I've started so many side businesses and of course 2XU itself. But it's easy when it's already something that comes natural to you, hard when you still have to figure out everything else.
So from that perspective, when you say it comes natural, because it seems from what I know from your background, you had a similar work history where you were working in that providing those assistant services to people, and that's where 2XU came about from a transition of that. So that component, having that understanding, makes sense. What about all the other parts to do with running a business? Was that just naturally there, or did you have some good coaches? How did you get around that?
I have a really good mentor, and since then I've gotten like so many other mentors before. But it started really with my co-founder Tom Tate. But I wanted to start a business with him basically, and with Tom, we joke around that he's my American dad because I've been with them for 9 years basically, and I'm his adopted Filipino daughter. And what has that looked like is anytime that I struggle with something, anytime that I go through, of course, first thing that I do is try to figure out by myself. But anytime I need like a second opinion or I just need an outside the box thinker, Tom is one of those guys where he can come up with 50 business ideas if you give him like 10 minutes. He's just that much of a brain power. So with him having that kind of brain and me being such an implementer, it kind of has helped a lot with how our dynamic has started into XU. And now it's of course, it's shifted in the last couple of years to me now being the person bringing things to him. But having him as a mentor has made the whole process so much easier. Still to figure out a lot of things, but then I don't have to figure it out alone.
I love what you said there, and that's really part of the reason I wanted to have you on this show, because there's a couple of words that you mentioned there and some that were implied. You mentioned you're an implementer, and you also mentioned that when you try to figure it out yourself, but then you've gone to the advice of someone that's very experienced. From that perspective, because the way I look at business and anything in life is a lot of people have done things successfully. And if you follow that instruction, things become easier. If you try and say, no, I'm going to do it my way, which has no basis in what is actually needs to be done from a principle perspective, it becomes really, really challenging. Now, from what I know of you, you're a very good listener and you are an implementer. How much do you think that's helped your transition to running a successful business or starting a successful business at 23 and you're still under 30? If I'm not going to ask your age because it's not a polite thing to do, but I should disclose that I actually do know your age because we've talked before. But I had an acting career before this. But from that perspective, you've done so much in such a short period of time. How much do you attribute that to A, finding good mentors, B, listening, and C, I was going to say 3, then changing things, but actually then going out and doing it?
The biggest one is just me taking action. I think like if I had to rank those 3, the biggest one is the fact that I do like a lot of people multiple times in my life have called me either a bulldozer, like without prompting, they'll say the same thing. I've been a bulldozer, I've been a cannonball, I've been a wrecking ball. Just because they will set something and my brain will be so curious enough that I'll actually just try it. Without like pushing, without having to remind me, I probably have already done it. And for me, like I follow, I still kind of do follow Gary Vaynerchuk. And first content that I saw from him is like, use your 20s as your launch pad. You are literally a blank piece of paper. You don't have anything. So make as many mistakes as you can. And that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been taking action to learn. That's kind of the biggest one. So the listening part, I most of the time for the listening part, it helps having the great mentor to listen to. So if you have a crappy mentor and you're a great listener and you take action, it's not gonna something will happen basically, but it's not the outcome that you want. But for me, having Tom as because he says this all the time, like he doesn't know everything, but he's willing to figure it out with me. So like for me, having that kind of mentor who's more collaborative, who's not just showing me the way, but he just shows me what the vision is and then lets me bulldoze my way through it, has helped with the collaboration that we both do have into growing 2XU. And before 2XU, when I became CEO at 20, that was his company that I was CEO of. He was the one who originally trained me to be CEO of his company. And when it was automated enough, then I wanted to create my own business with 2XU. So the collaboration of the last 9 years basically has worked so well just because he's the visionary. He points, I run, I get it done. And now thankfully I have other team members who can do that for me. But then that's kind of how that's great start to having a mentor did.
What do you think it is from that perspective of taking action? As you said, the number one, you reversed the order, which thank you for correcting me on that. I appreciate that. But action was the key thing. What do you think it is about taking action that enabled you to take action, and what stops other people from actually just doing it?
Well, part of my story is for the first, well, all my early 20s, basically, I was in survivor mode. Like I came out of a barely surviving a super typhoon. So my brain at that point was like, I want to make a life where I matter. That was kind of the mode that I was in. So when it came to taking action, I just did things without fully like feeling the fear, I guess, or feeling the anxiety of what it was, because I didn't have anything to fear. I didn't have anything to be anxious about. Later on, when I was in my mid-20s, because of who I was in my early 20s, it was easy for me to make that part of my identity, that I am an action taker. I am someone who gets things done. So even as I did start getting the anxieties and fears, because then I failed a couple times, I've done things wrong, I still had that identity that even though I've done things wrong, things still worked out for me. Like that was kind of the other side of it. It's like even if I lost 20 employees in a night, and I did that. That has happened very early on in my career. Afterwards, I was
You
able to
bulldozed them out. Is that what it is?
yeah. I was able to then shift things, make things a little better. So then every time that I then hired afterwards, I knew who to look out for, what was a mistake that I made there. So that's always kind of like my part of my belief as an entrepreneur. It's like I could keep trying and keep failing, but I know that every failure that I go through, as long as I keep standing up, then the next time that I do it, it doesn't have to be as hard. It doesn't have to be just a failure, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And from that perspective, and we've covered off, and I'll put the link in the show notes for this one to the other interview that we did on the Share.care podcast. But from that perspective, so with the business side of things, we can break business down into a number of different areas. And one area it's a breakdown of 4 different areas that I liked was business gets broken into sales, marketing, operations, and admin. Is there a breakdown that works from your perspective as to where you prioritize time?
It really depends on one, the kind of business, and also what the current goal is. Like in this year alone, I've shifted so much. My almost every quarter, I'm focusing on something different, different part of my business. So, first quarter, a lot was in admin systems of like making sure that's all set. Second quarter was operations. This quarter, it's all in marketing. So it really depends on, as the business grows, what you should be focusing on. Um, because for 2XU, we've grown so much in just in the second quarter, now going into the third quarter, that I have had to shift basically what I want to work on, I want to focus on, because there's not one fits all formula. If you have a product based business, then a lot of your focus would always kind of be on sales or on client retention. If you had, for me, since it's a service based business, a lot of my focus usually is in operations. But again, depending on where you're at, your own like for me, I freaking love marketing, and I'm a marketing nerd, but I'm also a systems nerd. So between the two, I go back and forth. But then the rest, like everything else, when it comes to like the hiring side, or the taking care of the people side, I have amazing people that I can count on that now. So like that also is one of the things that gradually happens in your business. Is right now, if you're starting out, you're focusing on all of it. You're wearing all of the hats. But eventually you get to the point where you're hiring people who are smarter than you, who can figure things out faster than you, that you get to the point where you can now then choose where you want to focus on in your business, rather than just running around turning off fires everywhere you can.
I love that. You're a lady after my own heart, using freaking and nerd twice in a sentence. That's awesome.
There you go.
From that perspective, though, when you're doing that, because a lot of times we can get stuck doing what I call busy work, where we're doing things that really don't result in results, where we might be rebranding, or we think, oh, we need to refine this, and the perfectionism kicks in. Has that happened to you? And if so, how did you adjust so that you focus on the tasks that gave you results?
For the busy work, I've kind of like created a self filter on that, because sometimes when it comes to busy work, one, I know when I'm getting carried away, because then my assistant redirects me. It's usually like,
how do you know? Is it your assistant tells you? She gives a little
sometimes
signal and
I
goes,
her.
yeah,
Just like
whale. Yeah, also whatever the safe word is.
yeah. Because like I will sometimes get sucked into a project that I probably shouldn't have been sucked into. And when we do like because we have daily syncs with my assistant, she say, so what, and then I'll give my report like, oh, this is what I got done yesterday. She's like, oh, I thought you were gonna get this done. And I'm like, oh shoot.
I'm sure it's
So
another S word that you use, but
yeah. So it helps that there's someone who keeps me accountable when it comes to like the busy work versus like the work that actually gets work done. And on the other end, like I am a big fan of the book The One Thing, by Sam Carpenter, if I remember right, where he talks about like find the domino that collapses all of the other dominoes. So find the big domino that makes everything else done. So with that in mind, and also right now I'm reading the book Make Time. One of the things that it also talks about is find the highlight of your day that you want to make, that at the end of the day you're like, oh, thank God I got that done. So with those kind of combined as part of my systems, basically, it has made it so much easier for me to not get sucked into the things that I shouldn't be doing. And again, the accountability to my assistant checking in on me, or whenever she sees something on my to-do list, like, hey, should we delegate it to X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, we probably should. And then she's the one who follows up with them afterwards. So that's kind of the two punch basically that I have on my caliber, my productivity caliber.
So from that perspective, the productivity side of things, and you mentioned accountability. So that first part is that you're sharing, you actually have a clear list and you're sharing that list with your assistant. Is that right? Am I understanding correctly?
Yep.
Yeah. So how did you let
I do.
go? A lot of business owners have trouble letting go of that.
I do. A lot of our clients still go through it. Well, with my assistant, like another philosophy or quote that I have in my head sometimes is NBD, or no big deal. That was kind of the thing. It's like whenever I'm trying to do a risk, whenever I'm trying something new, or whenever I have to trust something, I think of NBD. Like it should be no big deal. Like if tomorrow, knock on wood, on every wood service that I have here, like 2XU like collapses, it's still going to be no big deal, because then I have learned so many skills from running this business that I can just jumpstart and start the next one after that. And I already have like plans of what that next one is. So when it came to letting go of control for my assistant, because she's my third one, I've basically been able to NBD every single time. Like, oh, like today I just shared with her, like I found a finance sheet, which I've never done really before. I'm like, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, you know what? I trust you. You've been here for a while. You know what's confidential and what's not. Here you go. So I did the NBD in my head, because like, and this is something from the books. I'll reference so many books just because I read a lot of them. Speed of Trust. Forget who the author is, where he talks about like you want to give trust first and not let people disappoint you, because then at least for you've given them all the resources to succeed or to fail, and it's now kind of a little bit up to them. So when it came to delegation, that's also something I always keep in mind, is that at least for me, even if they fail, at least they learn something. If they succeeded, great. On to the next thing. So on letting go, that's kind of the main thing I've kept in mind.
Awesome. I love that with that delegation. Now, if we shift into the operations of a business. When you're starting a business, you've got an idea. You're saying, okay, I can solve a problem, or hopefully that's the approach that you're taking is I've got a problem to solve. From that side of things, the next step is, once you've identified that, is to go and find some clients. So there we're talking about lead generation and business development. Was that a scary process for you? And how did you go about your lead generation and business development?
So for the lead generation side, so before 2XU was a service, it was a course. So we were teaching people how to hire a virtual assistant for the first time. We were getting affiliates basically from people who told their clients that they should hire virtual assistants, and we were kind of a back end course for some of them. So that's kind of where our first few clients came in. It was like our very first client was someone who was in a conference we were speaking at, teaching how to start hiring online, and he said, I love your product, but can you just do this for me? So that was kind of the natural thing that fell into place for the first couple of clients. Plus, like I said, I am a marketing nerd, so I knew a lot of it was creating really good content. I know a lot of it was giving value first, so then other people will start seeing that as they start searching. Like I know for the last 3 clients, so we've gotten into XU, they've came from a YouTube channel of like finding, typing into YouTube like how to hire your first virtual assistant. So that's kind of where that's come up. The other side of it is partnerships. Like we've We have a really good affiliate program in 2XU. A lot of our clients referred their friends. We partnered up with an accelerator program who also said, one of the first things you should do is hire a virtual assistant. Here's 2XU. So that was on the lead gen part. That was kind of the natural thing that kept evolving out because a lot of people need a virtual assistant in the first place.
Yes.
And then when it comes to the ops, the operational side and developing that further, it was just a test, fail, succeed. That was kind of the flow that I kept going into. The very first client we had no systems at all. I had an idea on how to train people because I did that for when I was still running like the publishing company. But for like daily, doing the daily meeting, weekly meeting, monthly meeting, all of that good stuff when it comes to having a virtual assistant, we never had it 2 years ago. It's only like literally in the last year and a half that we started implementing it for our clients. So there's a lot of test fail, like, oh, if we add this, would that work? What did the client think? If we added this, what would that look like? Because at that time there were some books and courses that came out on how to work with your virtual assistant, but there was a lot of examples. So that it's for us, we were becoming that example. We're becoming our own case study on what worked for this kind of industry or what worked for this kind of client. Until now, we have this full-fledged business operating systems in 2XU, where it's easy for us to work with easier at least. There's probably an easier way to work with our clients.
So from that perspective, you mentioned test fail there. So you're trying different things, because from what I've seen and for the years that I've been playing in this field, there seems to be an attitude that it's almost like there's a holy grail or the genie, in the lamp, that if you find this one thing, it's just going to work forever. But that's not correct, is it?
It's a lot of you can create a framework. I guess that's kind of the biggest one that's helped us kind of have our genie is like for 2XU, we're always looking at three things. One, are you working on the right tasks? Two, do you have the systems to then repeat those results? And three, do you have the person who can run all two, basically? And for us, like we'll modify how that looks like per client. Like we'll have a client who is starting from scratch, doesn't even know what to delegate to an EA. So then we'll start building that. Some of them have had EAs before, so they know what they want to delegate. So then once we hire for someone, then it's just creating the systems. And some of them will have two. They know what to delegate. They have the systems for it. Their amazing assistant just left. So then we're filling in the gap of like, then what's the next level assistant do they need? That has helped a lot of like just having a quick scorecard that we can check our clients against to see where they're at and see where we can basically fill in the gaps for them.
Love that. And from that perspective as well, when you're looking at that component, because you said you're a marketing nerd, I love that. What's the difference in your mind between marketing and sales?
I love that question because I haven't been asked that in so long, but I used to get like a lot of that same question. So the difference between marketing and sales. So marketing is you're trying to bid. It's kind of like look at this, look at here. This is kind of if someone hasn't known that they need this, like if let's say for you, like right now, depending on the time of day that you probably have had your dinner, you're probably good. But then if I show you a box of cookies, you're like, oh, I want that. So that's marketing. That
would work giving them really well because I haven't had dinner yet.
There you go. That's what I was like, depending on the time of day.
I haven't had dinner yet. I'm really hungry.
There you go. So for you, that's marketing because I've shown you a bid. Like I bid towards your attention and then I caught it. Sale is when you like let's say you need a little convincing. You're like, oh, I'm only doing sugar free. I only do. I'll just have it after my dessert. I'll come back later. Then for me, like I have to convince you. Like, oh,
you might just have me at Tim Tam.
There you go. I was like, oh, but then later on it'll be stale. These are fresh cookies. These are really the sugar free for sure, 100%. So that's sale is when you've gotten the attention of the person and you're now getting them to either say just yes, give them the email or get their email or get their actual get them to pay. That's kind of like how I've in my head defined the difference between the two.
Fair enough. And from that perspective with sales, if you could use just one word to sum up what makes a sale work, what word would you choose?
Attention. I'll be
Hmm.
the main one. Um, because like the moment that I see the client look away or look at their phone, I've lost the sale. Um, because I bid for their sale. That's why they're here. Like they've seen our marketing or they were referred by someone, so on and so forth. But the moment that I've lost their attention, the moment that they're not anymore either engaged or they don't resonate with it, I've lost it.
Mm.
It's not anymore something that's for them. They can look for other people. They can prolong their own pain of not having an assistant yet just because I've lost that attention.
Mm.
Because like I said, like anytime I notice that it's not anymore 100% like they're engaged with me, I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, now they'll probably, I know by the end of the call, they'll probably say no. We've set the follow-up call, but like, they'll probably say no. Like I've been doing this for so long, still on both marketing and sales, that I kind of can see the cues of where people would land.
Mm. And from that perspective with attention, do you have a process that you follow to garner that attention? Is it like a storytelling process where you're building suspense as you're going, and like a good movie or a good book where you have to turn the next page and you'll find out what's happening next?
I've kind of done that a lot. Because for me, like, of course, I thankfully have a lot of amazing success stories and case studies from our current clients. So whenever I'm trying to do the sale or I'm getting them to the other side, I'll always try to think, what's something that they do that can be related to a current client that we have. They could be like on from the left field of the kind of industry that they're in, but I'll try to find the tie to have them see themselves into Ixie already.
Mm.
Like the other day, I they're a company where there's a seasonal, basically they're a touring company, so only certain times of the year that they have a lot of people. And I compared them like, oh, we have company who they're a reforestation company in Australia, and they're also doing seasons. They can only plant during certain seasons. So then I would say then your EA can be mentored by that EA, because then they'll know what to expect, what to do. So I'm
Mm.
already doing kind of a little bit of assumptive close of like, yeah, you're part of our story now. This is part of what we'll do with you, how we'll work with your assistant, how we'll work with you. And just by doing that back and forth of tying them somehow to current clients and current assistants that we have has helped a lot with like building that of like, oh, okay, that's possible for me. This is part of my story now.
Mm. Sounds like what you're doing there is also creating some trust. How much of that sales and closing the sales comes down to creating that relationship of trust?
Oh, a lot of it, because like they're literally giving me, by extension, giving me a lot of access to their business. They're giving me a
Mm.
lot of access to their vulnerabilities of like, hey, I don't know how to do this. I need someone else to do it. And that's really
Mm.
hard to accept, to say out loud.
Yeah.
Um, so they're opening up to me about things that they can't do for their business, thinking that they can do everything. So for me, I give them a little bit of that soft nudge of like, hey, it's okay. Like I don't even know how to do this, or like my assistant helps me do this, or someone else's assistant does this for them. So it's building that. Um, I like calling it in my head sometimes that I'm one of my personal brands before was called the virtual ate, which is like older sister in Tagalog. So I step into that ate, the older sister role of like, no, you're doing great, sweetie. You're gonna be fine. We'll take care of you. Like that, like older sister like vibe of like, it's gonna be
Mm.
great. You can fail, but we'll they'll ask me like, oh, what happens if an assistant fails or it doesn't work out? We'll take care of the whole thing. You don't even have to worry about it. We'll take care of your data. We'll take care of everything else in your business. We'll even try to keep it running, even if the assistant's out. Blah blah blah. So I kind of step into that building relationship of like, oh, and I'm part of your life. I'm someone that you can talk about if you're struggling about X, Y, and Z. Chances are probably either I went through it or another client went through it, and I can walk you through how you can do it too.
Mm. So linking that back to what you said earlier when we talked about that there was 3 points, one of those was listening. How much do you think from your perspective is the sales process about listening to what they need and then uh, delivering and solving that need?
The listening part is the biggest part of what I do, because like a lot of the time I've found that they'll say one thing, but they actually mean the other. But then I've done this enough that I can see what it is that they need. That they'll say, like, oh, I actually really, really need like someone in marketing, someone to do X, Y, and Z. But then I'll ask them like, okay, you need someone to do this, but where's your operations at? Where's this? And then I'll ask them, and then they'll dive into like, oh, I actually don't have that yet. I don't have this system set up. So then I'll say, what if then we'll start hiring with someone who has some marketing experience, but we'll focus a lot on the operations, because once we solve this, then we can do that, and then we can get to the outcome that you need. So it's the hearing the things that they don't say, or seeing the things that they don't see just yet, because they're just such in pain in this one thing. But because I've seen it, I've listened to what it is that the root cause is. It's helped me kind of give them that aha moment of like, oh, this is why you need to XU, because you guys have this expertise. I'm like, yep, exactly. And then walking them through the next steps. So the listening part is not just listening to what they say, but listening to what they don't say, looking at the cues of like when they flinch, when they like, oh, when they engage more, has helped a lot in that whole process.
And you've used those words several times in this interview. I've done this enough. How much of that, when you talk about that intuitive process, is your success now related to having that experience, to have done this enough to know what the state of the land is, to be able to make those intuitive, so to speak, assessments?
It's helped a lot in a lot of things. There's always things that I don't know, and I'm always open to that. Like
Mm.
whenever a client's going through something where I'm like, wait, what's that? So then I go to my mentor. That's usually the next step for me, is whenever I'm stuck on something. I have
Mm.
Tom. I have one of my amazing business coaches is a guy named Dan in the US. I have
Mhm.
another one who is more of my systems coach. So I have like different people that I can now go to if it's something that's either I've not gone through before, or I've already
Mm.
tried to coach them and it still didn't work. So like it's having also that team, that backup for me has helped a lot if it's not something that I can then just intuitively give to someone.
And you mentioned then, you just rattled off 3 coaches. So like an elite athlete, they all have multiple coaches. Yourself, obviously a powerhouse, bulldozer, wrecking ball, whichever word you want to use, adjective. Um, how much of that do you feel is about your success is having that ability to say, okay, I don't know it all, and I'm going to ask someone for assistance?
Probably a lot. Um, just because like the other thing that I identify is I'm such a sponge. Like the reason why I can
Mm.
do so much is because I just absorb almost anything. Of course,
Mm.
now I've learned how to filter things where I don't have to believe every single thing someone tells me. Um, but because of that curiosity, because of that wanting to find out what's next, like I hate TV series that cut off just or they get canceled right as they're really getting good. That has kept me in that innovation mode, that's kept me into that what can I do better, what can I do next, rather than like, oh, this is it, like I've learned all that I can, I don't really think I can learn anything else. That has also been the part of that's kept me growing to XU, because anytime that we have a client that I've never like seen their industry before, um like we have a client who does like print managing, and I'm like,
Mhm.
what does that mean? So then for me, because one of the biggest reasons why I started to exceed in the first place was actually to learn how other businesses work. um
Mm.
so with that, that's still until this day that the little Leanne still runs around trying to figure out like, oh, how does this work, how does this work? So that wanting for growth, knowing that I don't know everything but I can ask and have the resources, is one of the bigger things. So it could be like action, and then having to listen and be curious. It's kind of one thing in my head, and then having that really good mentor helps a lot.
And from that perspective of the business cycle, or the cycle of a business, I should say, as opposed to, I don't want to link that to an economic cycle, but the process, because if I understand correctly, if I've heard you correctly from our previous discussions, that you had your business that went really well, then there were some areas where you weren't quite paying attention to, and then things didn't go so well, and then you had to adapt to that. How much
Mm.
of that requires the resilience to keep going, with compared to that expectation everything's going to be warm fuzzy clouds all the time?
Good question. A lot of it was because in that, and it's the same time this year that happened with 2X, where we lost half of our business because I wasn't paying attention enough. Um, Part of it was, I've so many times I've even said it to my co-founder, to my mentor Tom. I said, should I just get a job? Should I just like give it all up? I can probably like work overseas. I'll do that for a few years and then like I'll figure it out. I'll come back and figure this all out again. Um, but there is that sense of resilience.
Mm,
Well, for me, like I know part of my story is like I am kind of the queen of resilience of like everything that I've gone through in life.
yeah.
And also like it is that having that belief that things will work out. Like it's not just all fluffy and fluffy rainbows. There's
Mhm.
going to be hard rain. There's going to be a super typhoon, as I've gone through. But then it's you knowing that it's not always this season. There's always going to be the next season and the next season. You might be in your winter drought sad season right now, but then in the next season it'll start to spring. It's kind of that belief that my mom used to say this all the time of life is a cycle. Like if it goes up and you go down and up and you go down, and every time you go down you're supposed to learn something so then you can go up again. So
Mm.
having that belief in my head constantly has helped me, even when see myself as a total failure and probably should never get up again the next day. I still get up the next day because then it's then the next day and then looking forward to that next season in my life.
From that perspective, when you're looking at that, as a business owner, it sounds like you need very specific character traits to actually endure it, to do it, because it can be really, really challenging. If you were
Mm-hmm.
to rank, what would be your top 3 character traits that are required of a business owner to actually not just run, but succeed in running a business?
First one is that curiosity. Um, because when you're running a business or you start a business, you have this vision of like, this is exactly how it would look like. Usually it's not the case. Usually it's different. Usually it's actually this. You're expecting ABC, but it's actually X, Y, and Z. So having that curiosity to see how other people do it. Like for me, I have this thing I call niche hacking, where I go through someone else's business and I look exactly how they do their operations and marketing. And I
Mm.
love doing that exercise because
Yeah.
then I end up going on to like reviews of the page, reviews from employees, seeing how they talk about their day. I stalk sometimes their employees on Facebook, Instagram.
Mm.
But it's because of that that I can understand someone else's operations or business a little bit better. That then I can look and what I can apply. And of course, like I read close to almost 50 books a year. And
Mhm.
that comes from my curiosity of like, how else can I do this better? How has this person struggled through? And I love what you said earlier of people usually try to make their own way, but then usually you forget that you have the resources. You never really start from scratch because there's already so many uh, mentors, books, courses that you can go through. And then you
Mm.
could figure it out from how you want to be different from that. But then
Mhm.
you don't have to start from scratch. So that curiosity is definitely key. The second one is characteristic for it is N that resilience. That resilience is the biggest one. I've seen a lot of people, and before, even when I was running, like, the publishing company, I've seen people who try to copy what we do, but
Mhm.
because they don't have the resilience of having
Mm.
to find the next at that point, find the next author or find the next person to work with or, like, hire someone totally new into your business, um, you get burnt out so fast when you're an entrepreneur, when you don't have that resilience, when you don't have the belief that it is just a
Mm.
season in your life, that you can have the resources in the future. So that resilience is a big one. And a third good one is a really good third one. There's a curiosity of resilience. I would say good third one is just knowing when to ask for help. We
Mm.
talked about, like, for me, like one of the biggest attributes to my success has been having really good support systems. Like,
Mhm.
even in my worst parts of my actual like personal life, I had a year where I lost my mom. I got broken up with after 10 years. I got into a really bad motorcycle accident, all within like 8 months of each other. But
Oh.
because I had a really good support system, I
Mm.
had that belief of like I can keep going. Having
Mm.
that's it's not really a characteristic or skill, but like just having that, hey, I need help. It's like
Mhm.
not being super reliant on yourself, but knowing that you can have the resources and the people who can support you to get to the next thing. Because business is just one part of your life. You still have your personal life. You still have to um a lot of people talk about work life balance. I don't believe in that. I believe that your work and your life are just one whole thing. So you
Yeah.
need support for all of it. So having the knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to having that discernment that, hey, this is something I probably shouldn't be doing, helps a lot.
So from that perspective, because you mentioned work-life balance, but I want to take that into the systems because you've mentioned systems a number of times. How important is it to have those systems in place? And when you look at the systems as well, when you talked about having, losing half the business. Was it a broken system or was it not paying attention to the system? How do you identify, what is the appropriate systems to put in place?
So for the not paying attention part of the business, it was a system that wasn't built. That was kind of the
Mm.
biggest part. It was a growth into XU that I've never experienced before as an entrepreneur at that point. So I didn't know what system that needed to be built. That was kind of
Mm.
the two-way part of it.
Mhm.
On knowing what systems need to be built, um, now where I am at, like I can start building things for different people. Like systems for me is like your default. Like if
Mhm.
everything fails or if everything's going too fast, you have a default that you can go into.
Yeah.
Like if I had the same systems that I had now last year, Twixu would be probably times four of where it's at because I lost a lot of momentum going through that experience.
Mm.
But if I had that, then I would have that again, that fallback, that default of like, and I tell our clients this all the time because when they get onboarded with 2XU, we have this whole 90-day program of like building out their task system, delegation system. And for them, when they're starting up with their system, they're like, do I really need this right now? Do I need to do this? Like, we're not really doing much. I'm still introducing her to the company. I'm like, yes, you do. Because then as they start to get busy, as the assistant's doing so many other things in their business, having the default or the system of like, hey, we have daily meetings, we have weekly meetings. This is what we talked about. This is the monthly
Mm.
retrospective. This is what we talk about. Um, that has helped them still keep in contact and sync.
Mhm.
6 months to a year later, 2 years later, working with their assistant because they've already put those systems in place. And that's kind of a good way to think about why you should build standard operating procedures in your business, like templates and things, because you never know how fast things can grow. You never know how
Mm.
fast things can change almost overnight.
Yeah.
And when you have things in place, when you've streamlined how you do certain things, you don't have to teach it over and over again. You don't have to keep reviewing it. You just have a thing that, hey, new employee, here's how we do things. If you can
Mm.
suggest anything better, feel free to. But then it's not their output won't be as different as the output of like the five other people that you've hired. So that's kind of like where and how I see systems as well, where they put a lot of that structure and again that fallback and then default to the business.
But from that perspective, you got the systems in place and then some things don't go quite right. And if you're focusing on the news, for example, as they say in the news, if it bleeds, it's leads. So generally, the world is falling apart if you watch the news. There's a war on, the recession's coming, all that kind of stuff. How do you keep your focus on what you need to keep it focused on when you have a barrage of all that kind of information coming at you?
Well, one is as someone who also worked in the news because that was kind of part of my life for 3 months. I was a journalist.
Hmm.
They're always looking for bad news because bad news always sells.
Hmm.
I've learned how sensationalized news is, so I've also
Hmm.
learned how to turn it off. being someone who went behind the scenes of how the news business works, I was like, so I don't always have to listen what they say. Okay. So that was kind of the one part of my life experience that I'm grateful for that I did go through.
Mhm.
Um, and on the other side of it, of how to keep focused, I'll always have like my three things that I know. Back to systems, I know I can default to.
Mhm.
So it's either I'm focused. The main one I'm always focused on is hiring. 'Cause that's
Mhm.
usually like the biggest thing, of course, for a service-based business. The second one is then delivering. And the
Mhm.
third one is because I love doing it, just marketing. So anytime that I'm been torn apart, I have like 50 to-dos that I have to do in that day, I default going back to that. Okay, hiring, is hiring good? No one needs anything from me on that. Okay, let's go to the delivery part or operations. Like, okay, everyone go to that. Then I kind of go and look at that flow for myself, so
Mhm.
that it's easy for me to know what to focus on next, what to do next. And anything below that, below those three, I know I should probably delegate it or
Mhm.
question myself and ask myself why it's there in the first place.
So as a default, if I'm hearing correctly, rather than paying attention to the news, you have a set 3 items that you go to, which is hiring, operations, and marketing. Is that right?
Mhm. Yep.
And I would guessing from what you discussed before by the quantum of books that you read, the books would be a close fourth if I'm if I'm hearing you
Yeah.
correctly.
Well, that's Leon on focus more. The rest of that list is like books, travel, speaking gigs, or like trying out something new that I saw on TikTok. That's kind of the rest of the list. But then the main three are those. Like I have again default and system of like how I want to relax, how I want to unwind, how I want
Mm.
to take a step back afterwards, because I know that's really important when you're entrepreneurs. You can't pour from an empty cup. So you need to know how to also take care of yourself.
How do you do that? Because when you're an entrepreneur, business owner, it's not a 9 to 5 job. B
Hmm.
but same token too, you as you said, you can't pour from an empty cup. How do you balance that out where during the and sometimes, and I know what it's like as well, you're working 14, 16-hour days because you just that things need to get done.
Yep.
How do you recognize when you need to slow down and what do you do to adjust?
So for that of like how I figured out a lot of test and failure as well. And it narrowed down to the point where now my current is I have systems for it. Like again, I keep going back to that because I literally try to build my life where it's sustainable for me, that I'm
Mhm.
not just always pushing. So the way that I've done that, and this comes from the business mentor I talked about, his name is Dan. He taught me like to put my life in my calendar. And that was one of the things
Mm.
where has changed a lot of how I do certain things. So on my calendar, I have the time I have to eat, because there's been times, and we all know this as entrepreneurs, where we're eating while we're working,
Yeah.
and that's not nice to you. That's not nice to the people that you're giving this value to. So I have a schedule of when I eat, when I sleep. I actually
Mhm.
have that on my calendar. I don't always follow it, but again, it's a default. Um, I have this schedule of when I want to stop working, when I want to wind down. Like I have a 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock on my calendar is shut off. So I'm
Mm.
slowly shutting off from the things I'm doing. Again, I don't always follow it, but at least it's there for me
Mhm.
to look at and to know. I've scheduled out when I want to hang out with my friends, like the people who are really important to me. I have it
Mhm.
actually on my calendar when I want to have breakfast with people, when I have dinner with people, like the recurring ones that because I know they're busy, so that's the only way that I know I can put them on. I can put myself on on their calendar basically. And I know that like on Wednesdays I take the whole afternoon off. Like my Wednesday morning is really usually very operations and finance heavy. The afternoon
Mm.
I'm out. People can reach me on chat, but if they want me to do anything on my laptop, I'm not on my laptop.
Mm.
And it's because I want to have that feeding myself a little bit of like, okay, I'm giving back a little bit. So whether I am and usually on Wednesdays I'm on a date with my boyfriend, like we call it Wednesdays basically, because he knows that I'm out during that time, or we're watching a movie, I'm finishing a book. And on
Mm.
weekends, like I always try to not work. And I tell
Mhm.
other people that you probably shouldn't work, because then I purposely won't respond to them sometimes, if because then that makes, other than of course if it's urgent, so then they're forced to take a break, because I also believe that as a leader, you have to be the role model for your people. So if you keep showing them that you're working, you're burning the midnight oil, you are burning yourself out constantly, then they think that that's the norm. But for me, I want to give our assistants, our people in our admin, the show of like, no, I'm not. Look, I'm going around the city today. I'm posting on my Facebook story that this is what I'm doing. It gives like, okay, I don't have to like kill myself over this job. Okay. So because I've seen so many of my friends who are amazing bosses and amazing entrepreneurs, but because of the way that they work, they don't see that the rest of their people are following them and burning themselves out as well. So I've kind of learned from them as well of like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that to my peeps as well.
Which can be done as an entrepreneur. You spend so much time working, and the employees they're going on holidays and things like that. And I must say I'm a little bit juxtaposed right now, because you've taught me that I probably should put meals in my calendar, which I haven't done. And because I haven't had lunch and it's or dinner and it's nearly 8 o'clock at night here now, and your references to cookies has made my stomach rumble. So I'm not sure whether I'm upset with you or whether I'm glad that you've told me that I should put meals in my calendar.
Well, that's why we put it on our calendar.
Exactly. So
Forget.
I will thank you for that advice. So I really appreciate that. I'll focus on that part of it and let my tummy just deal with what it has to deal with. But from that, you've mentioned as well, because you've scaled your business, you've built it up, you lost half of it, so that's a scale in the direction you probably didn't want, and then you've built it back up again. What is that process? What has made scaling easier? Well, what tips would you give people to make scaling easier for people that want to scale their business?
First is having the right team. Like I feel so much more confident scaling to XU now than I was last year, because I have managers now. Um I told this story in the other podcast where I got to the point where I was managing 17, 18 people all by myself. And I probably should not have done that. And now we are at 17, 18 people, but I'm only managing 6 people in reality, and everyone else managing everyone else. That for me has made it so much easier. I'm like, I always kick myself in my head. I'm like, why didn't I do that earlier? Why didn't I do that easier? Again, that entrepreneur like sense of control, that was kind of where it was. Like I wanted to control where things are at, what the output was. But now having a team who's managing everyone else has helped make that shift of like, okay, now I'm confident. Like if we got like 10 clients tomorrow for 2XU, I have now the people and the systems to run both, to help me like manage through that scaling work through that we have to do. So that's kind of the very first one, is then having that team and mindset like, hey, I can have a team take care of everyone else. It doesn't have to always just be me managing these people. Has helped a lot. And like the rest is, I guess, because I have experienced losing half of my business and I never want to do that again, that's another fire up my butt. It's kind of like, Leanne, we know what that feels like. We don't want that again. That's kind of the other thing, is like because I've learned a lot of the lessons from that phase of scaling. I know I probably don't know everything that I have had to learn. There's probably still lessons that'll come up later on in my life, but then I've learned enough where I can avoid this, I can do this so that this doesn't happen again, or I can do this so we can avoid that entirely. We're just going on a different direction. Because when you scale your business, when you're growing something, you never know, like exactly like on marketing, you never know if your TikTok video will pop off. And you then already have, and I've experienced this, you already have like 300 comments of people who hate you. There's also then you don't know when something will pop off and you have it happened to me I think 2 days ago, where one of my TikTok videos hiring, like, hey, we're currently hiring right now in 2XU, got to 40,000 views on TikTok, and because of that we got like 200 applicants overnight. So then, like, again, because we have systems on it, we have the right people on it, then they can start going through that. It doesn't have to be me. So it boils down to that, because then the last piece, again, is always just the systems. And now I've built enough of the systems where I can scale. Like we can handle having 200 applicants versus like 2 years ago, we would have like, oh my God, everything is now broken,
Yeah.
kind of.
Sorry, yeah, okay. And from that perspective, with that scaling and having that approach, is it, what would you sum up as to what it is to be a business owner? Because it sounds like it's a lot of hard work, but what is it that's fulfilling about that?
Intuition, one of our, and the same for me as a belief, is that entrepreneurs are one of the greatest creators of value. Everything that we see, from the computer that you're using, from the camera, from the little things that go into it, from our desk, from our homes, came from an entrepreneur who's crazy enough to want to
Mm,
change something in the world to make things a little bit easier for someone.
mm,
And for me, when you're an entrepreneur, that that's kind of like a people usually forget that, like as entrepreneurs especially, that we forget that's the value that we create in the world. So
mm,
when you're an entrepreneur, you're always looking at that of like, what value am I creating in the world? Am I making the world a little bit easier? Am I
mm,
making the world a little bit more fun? The people entrepreneurs for entertainment. Am I giving the world more information that they didn't know before? The researchers, basically people who have built their businesses around developing and creating things. And that's the reality of it. Like, you became an entrepreneur wanting to create value, wanting
mm,
to have a sense where the world is different now that you're here. That's kind of the other thing. It's like the world is now different because I'm providing this. Someone else's story is now different because I'm providing this. So it's keeping that in mind, that as you go through all of the crap that usually we have to go through as an entrepreneur, and I'm saying we have to because there's no other way out of it. You can learn from other people, but there will be things of your story that has to happen. As like from the Spider-Man multiverse movie, where there's going to be canon moments of being an entrepreneur that you have to go through. Um, it'll be that turn the page, it'll be that curiosity, it'll be that taking action, it'll be everything else that we've talked about so far that will take you to the next step. But to start as an entrepreneur, you're a person who wants to create value in the world, in whatever way that you're thinking of doing it.
I love that. And what's the nutshell, the key takeaway that you'd want someone to take from this in running a successful business where they can grow their revenue and profit?
You're never doing it by yourself. Even if you think that you're doing it by yourself, let's say you're a solopreneur, I've been doing this for 5 years, I've never really needed someone else. You've Someone else has been helping you in the way, whether it's your own
Mm,
customers telling other people to do it, whether it's you've actually asked your sister, your brother for help, or your mom for help. Um, you're never doing it alone, and you shouldn't be doing it alone. As an entrepreneur, it's extremely lonely, but it doesn't have to be that you're doing it alone.
mm,
I've kind of learned that difference of like the difference between lonely and alone. um and alone is mostly often alone is a choice. Doing it alone is a choice. Lonely is a feeling that you feel like, oh, I'm no one else will ever understand how I'm going through. No one else will ever see the things that I'm doing. But to be alone, to be struggling alone, to be trying to build a business alone, that's a choice. So
mm,
the biggest takeaway I always give people is you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to figure it out by yourself. You don't have to do it all by yourself. You don't have to skill by yourself. It is by like for you, like you're a perfect example of like, yes, you've been doing the podcasting thing alone, but you've learned a lot from the guests that you've had come along. You've now
mm,
learned what when you eat on your calendar. And those are like perfect examples of like being alone is a choice. So
mm,
I always encourage and implore people, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, have good help. Not just any
mm.
help, have good help of people who can actually get to the next level, not just those people who are like rah-rahing you, but they're not actually doing anything. Have good help, because then that will scale you or grow you as a person, not just your business, into something you never would have expected.
I love that. Leanne, Lai Lacaba, so wonderful having you on the show, sharing your knowledge. You are a powerhouse. Don't know about wrecking ball, but powerhouse I'll go with. You're just fabulous in the energy that you bring and the wisdom that you bring, especially at your age. You've done amazing things, and thank you for taking the time to share on growing revenue and profit.
Thank you so much. This was fun.